Hi, so welcome to another episode of History Hunters. I'm here at the Great Mausoleum. I'm going to try to enter it and try to photograph some graves of some famous people who are buried here. We're at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. One of the graves that I want to find is that of Gutzon Borglum, who was the sculptor of Mount Rushmore. He's actually buried in here under this giant stained glass of the Last Supper. Let's see if I don't get kicked out. Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale has been called the Disneyland of the dead because of the resting places of Hollywood entertainers. If that's the case, then the Great Mausoleum is a massive castle with its 11 terraces and over 100 stained glass windows. The building is grand in architectural design and houses the remains of such Hollywood luminaries as Jean Harlow, Clark Gable and wife Carole Lombard, Michael Jackson, and Elizabeth Taylor. But it's also an art gallery with its marble replicas of the 7 Michelangelo sculptures, including the Pieta. The building contains the same amount of steel and concrete as a 7-story skyscraper and embodies an eclectic mix of architectural styles. The Great Mausoleum was built in phases. The original structure was constructed between 1917 and 1920. The Memorial Terrace was added in the late 1920s, and the Memorial Court of Honor was inaugurated in 1931. Construction ended in the 1970s. One of the mausoleum's last building phases incorporated French Gothic architecture with lofty ceilings and large stained glass windows, creating an ethereal and tranquil space. Once inside the massive public corridor, we came to a large white angel standing guard over the tomb of actress Elizabeth Taylor, who passed away in 2011. Elizabeth Taylor was born in 1932 in London, England. She became a popular teen star after appearing in National Velvet in 1944.
I kept him eating instead of losing lunch.
You feeling all right?
Oh, isn't he beautiful? He's new. I've never seen him before.
And of course, she became a legendary Hollywood figure. I remembered the time that she and husband Larry Fortinsky had visited the same Modesto Hospital cancer ward where a great uncle of mine was ailing at the same time as Taylor's mother-in-law. To find the grave of the legendary Gutzon Borglum, I had to find the massive stained glass window of the Last Supper of Jesus done by 2 sisters in Italy, which took 6 years to complete and was shipped to Glendale, where it was dedicated in 1931. Beneath the glass window are the crypts of 8 dignitaries, one of which is Borglum. This area is called the Memorial Court of Honor. Each crypt is faced with an upright plaque, which gives the impression that the bodies were buried upright, but the verbiage on the tablet indicates they are all buried in crypts beneath the marble floor, in many cases with a spouse. Borglum is entombed here with wife Mary, who died in 1955. Gutzon Borglum, of course, is responsible for South Dakota's biggest tourist draw, that of Mount Rushmore. The sculptor, who was born in Idaho in 1867, began working on the Black Hills carving in 1927 and died in 1941, the same year that the project was finished by son Lincoln Borglum. Carrie Jacobs-Bond is also buried here. She was one of the most successful women composers of her day, by some reports earning more than $1 million in royalties from her music before the end of 1910. Her best-known song was probably I Love You Truly, which was sung by Ward Bond and Frank Phelan in the movie It's a Wonderful Life.
I love you truly, truly, dear.
Also buried here is physicist Robert A. Millikan, who was honored with the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1923 for the measurement of the elementary electric charge and for his work on the photoelectric effect. Another who is buried here is Glenn Dumke, who was a historian, educator, and author. I'll let you read his inscription. Also buried here is Rudolf Frimmel, a Czech-born composer of operettas, musicals, songs, and piano pieces, as well as a pianist. Jan Stejka was a Polish painter who created the massive painting of the Crucifixion that hangs in another cemetery building. The painting is mind-boggling in size and was seen by audiences in the 1904 St. Louis Exposition. Hubert Eaton, the man responsible for Forest Lawn Memorial Park itself, is also entombed here. He envisioned Forest Lawn as a place for the living, having sweeping lawns and noble architecture, stained glass, and a place that uplifted the community rather than being a place of sorrow. Lastly, in the Court of Honor is educator Rufus von Kleinschmidt, the 5th president of the University of Southern California. The college removed his name from a building in 2020 when he was targeted by the cancel culture due to his support of eugenics, believing that people with defects had no ethical right to parenthood and should be sterilized. Knowing that security cameras were keeping an eye on the most guarded areas, I moved around to see if I could spy other graves of the famous. That led me to the Sanctuary of Vespers, where the name of Mary Boland grabbed my attention. The actress, who lived from 1882 to 1965, is mostly forgotten today, but in the 1930s was a popular character actress, always playing major roles in her films and often starring, notably in a series of comedies opposite Charles Brueggel's.
Sherry, won't you join me in some champagne? Yes. You look so desolate sitting there all by yourself.
But
I'm the Countess de Love.
of course, I've seen your pictures in the paper.
And I've seen yours, too.
I'm Mrs. Stephen Haynes.
Oh, yes, of course. Oh, my dear, those crummy newspaper pictures didn't do you half justice. Let's all have a little party. Oh, you two, dearie. Now, don't sit in that corner and...
Entombed a few spaces over from her body is the body of baritone singer and actor Russ Columbo, who met an untimely and tragic death in an accidental shooting. It happened on September 2nd, 1934, when Columbo was visiting friend and photographer Lansing Brown in his house on Lillian Way. Brown decided to show off his collection of firearms and picked up an antique dueling pistol. The gun fired, sending a ball into Columbo's head. He died 6 hours later in a hospital. A promising career and a full life was preempted by the accident when he was just 26. Columbo was mostly a recording artist, with Prisoner of Love being his most notable song. He also appeared in several films, including The Texan with Gary Cooper.
Sweetheart, I remember a night like this, a sigh, a kiss, let's reminisce.
In the sanctuary benediction, I spied the Skelton family crypt. Buried in the alcove is comedic actor Red Skelton, best known for his national radio and TV shows from 1937 to 1971. Skelton made his film debut in 1938 alongside Ginger Rogers and Douglas Fairbanks Jr. in Having Wonderful Time, and would appear in numerous musical and comedy films throughout the 1940s and 1950s, with starring roles in 19 films.
And act like a proud horse.
Move over now.
Aha. That will be 20 demerits for bad stable manners. Girls, sit down.
Because he portrayed a clown, Skelton began painting clowns and made millions. I once wrote to him for a sketch, and he sent me this colored pen drawing of a clown, which he also signed. Also buried in the family vault is his son Richard, who died at the age of 10 from leukemia. After his son's diagnosis, Skelton took his family on an extended trip so that Richard could see as much of the world as possible. Newsreels reported on the family's return to the United States.
Comedian Red Skelton and family in New York from Europe. The trip was to let 9-year-old Richard, a leukemia victim, see places he's read about.
Pretty spectacular hat, Richard. Can you tell us something about all the things you have
Well,
on
we
it?
got it in Stockholm, and every place we go, we pick up some medals.
Richard Skelton Jr. died on May 10, 1958, just a week before his 10th birthday. His funeral service was attended by hundreds of mourners, mostly in the entertainment world. Also entombed here is Red Skelton's second wife, Georgia Davis Skelton, even though the couple divorced in 1971. She was reportedly despondent, and on May 10, 1976, the 18th anniversary of the death of their son, she killed herself at her home in Rancho Mirage, California. Georgia was just 54 years old. In a 1973 San Francisco ceremony, Red married for the third and last time to Lothian Tuland, who was 24 years his junior. She is still living. At the age of 84, Red Skelton died on September 17, 1997, at his home in Palm Springs. He was entombed here with his son and his ex-wife. Next to the Skelton alcove is the final resting place of theater mogul Sid Grauman, who has a very interesting past. Young Sid accompanied his father to the Klondike River region of the Klondike, Canada, in 1898 in search of gold. Once there, the teenager began to make quick money by entertaining miners for pieces of gold. At that point, he was bitten by the entertainment bug. He next staged profitable boxing matches. Grauman left the Yukon in 1900 to join his family in California. While in San Francisco, Sid saw a movie playing at the Cinematograph Theater. Sid soon realized how profitable the movie business had become and tried his own luck with it. With his dad as a partner, he began buying up theaters, of which 2 were destroyed in the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. Sid moved out of Los Angeles to nearby Hollywood. His next theater was the Egyptian, located on Hollywood Boulevard, which opened in 1922 with the premiere of Robin Hood starring Douglas Fairbanks. Next, he built the most lavish motion picture palace with Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Howard Schenck. Because of his Chinese statuary, the theater became known as the landmark Grauman's Chinese Theater. As final touches were being placed on the theater, Sid accidentally stepped into wet concrete during a visit to the construction site. That misstep gave him the idea to collect footprints of the famous stars like John Wayne and Marilyn Monroe. Sid Grauman died in 1950. So I wish I could get into this building right behind me. That's that tower right there. That's where Michael Jackson is buried, and he's completely off limits. I mean, if I could get in there, I would love to show it to you, but it's not going to happen. Now, a lot of my viewers know that I've been here to Forest Lawn Memorial Park here in Glendale, but I've never stopped to show you this church right here. It's the church where Ronald Reagan married Jane Wyman back in 1940. It's the Wee Kirk of the Heather Church. And there's a little place over here that him and Jane posed for their wedding picture. Beautiful church. And it's been a number of funerals here, famous funerals here. It is actually raining today. Let's see what this says. Wee Kirk of the Heather, Forest Lawn Memorial Park, reconstruction of Annie Laurie's Church in Glencairn, Scotland, erected in 1310 and was destroyed in 1805. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain who build it. Imagine Ronald Reagan being married right here in this church. And right over here, they've had this set up for some kind of service or something. But here's the wishing chair. There's a famous picture of the actor and his wife sitting right here in these chairs right here. This is wishing chair. Forest Lawn has built this Annie Laurie wishing chair of stone, which once composed a part of the old Wee Kirk at Glencairn, where Annie Laurie worshipped. In Glencairn, they say the fairies have blessed these stones. Tradition tells us that good fortune will forever smile upon the bride and bridegroom who sit in this chair on their wedding day, and hand in hand recite together the verse of the tablet in front of the wishing chair. I don't have to tell you, though, that Ronald and Jane divorced, so I don't know how good of a luck that was. Between 1929 and 1930, Frederick A. Hansen created the Wee Kirk of the Heather Chapel for Forest Lawn by copying the 17th century village chapel at Glencairn, Scotland, where Annie Laurie worshipped. The Wee Kirk of the Heather Church was the site of the 1937 funeral of 26-year-old Jean Harlow, where Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald did their best to get through a song. It was said that MacDonald collapsed in the arms of Eddy and couldn't get through Harlow's favorite song, which was Indian Love Call. It's really wet and rainy today. It feels kind of like it would over in England. It's dripping on me. I'm getting wet. Pretty cool grounds here. May the peace and happiness of him who loves you with a love that passeth all understanding enter your soul in this holy place and remain with you always, the builder. There's Jesus over there. So this is where Jane Wyman would have got dressed, I guess. In this door. And walked into the church this way. Another celebrity funeral held here was that of Douglas Fairbanks Sr., the swashbuckling actor who played Robin Hood, Don Juan, and Zorro in the silent films. He died on December 12th, 1939 of a heart attack. If I'm not mistaken, Rex Bell's funeral was here as well, and Clara Bow, his wife, grieving Clara Bow, was here. But can you imagine the history? Ronald Reagan and Jane Wyman coming out those doors, getting pelted by rice, and walking down these steps to create their Hollywood dream of a couple and love. So I want to thank you for joining us on this very brief visit to Forest Lawn Memorial Park here in Glendale, where you got to see that church back there and also the final resting place of Gutzon Borglum. Well, thank you so much. Curious what you thought of this video, even though it's really a quick one. Thank you so much.